Greetings and welcome to the Mill Valley Public Library. Mill Valley Historical Society proudly presents what has come to be affectionately known as the First Wednesday program. And it is a Wednesday and it is the first, so it's all good there. On the first Wednesday of each month, we invite guest speakers to present the Mill Valley Historical Society members. And I'm assuming you're all members. But if you're not, you're very interested in joining, and you'll look into that. We'll talk about that later. Focused on Mill Valley, the talk, Bay Area history. My name is Charlie Vogelheim, and I am a former Mill Valley Historical Society board member and an alleged millbilly. And I say that because I bought my shoes at Mosier's. So, yeah, there, see? And what kind of shoes? They were PF Flyers. And why? Because they had the action wedge. And what did that do? It made you jump higher and run faster. But I'm honored to be introducing tonight's program. Before I do, I want to remind everyone, including myself, how lucky we are to be in this beautiful library. And let's give a nice round of applause to the beloved library staff for all they do for us. Also, again, a brief word on the Mill Valley Historical Society. As we know, Mill Valley, history-wise, is not that old. We just celebrated our 125th year. Of course, that's the quasquicentennial. Did anyone go down to the square for that? How fun was that, right? Yeah, and some of us in this room have been around for more than half that time. Doesn't seem right, but again, still flushed with excitement from that great weekend. Many of us are waiting for the next 125th celebration. Mill Valley Historical Society, first Wednesdays, the walk into history, but coming up is the annual dinner. And I want to make sure everyone knows the annual dinner is on October 16th. Put that on your calendars. It's from 6 to 8:30, and we're going to have former Muir Woods National Park Service Ranger Mia give a talk. Yeah, so it'll be a good one, and she's going to talk a little bit about, again, all the placards and some of the updates on those and what can be corrected and what no longer can be corrected and everything in between. So look for that. The Historic Society dinner is really a lot of fun. And again, it is potluck. So you can go on the website and find out more about that. As a last name Vogelheim, you'd think I could say the word Die Naturfreunde, but it's the Nature Friends. It was founded in Vienna, Austria in 1895. So between the time Mill Valley started in 1890 and became a city in 1900, they were busy in Austria. An elementary school teacher, a blacksmith, and a law student, sounds like a bad Austrian joke, and he was a former president of Austria. Karl Renner formed the Nature's Friends. It was a time in the Habsburg monarchy when other elites still controlled access to the Austrian mountains. Berg free the mountains was their slogan. For those of us that grew up right here in Mill Valley, we explored the nearby free mountain, Mount Tamalpais. And I remember distinctly the day that we came around a bend on a trail and looked out and saw that beautiful tourist club nestled on the side of the hill in the trees above Muir Woods. Shocked that it was even there, ran home to tell the parents, and they said, "Oh, you must certainly mean the Mountain Home Inn." No, I don't. This is not that. This is something different. After taking them there, they joined and they were lifetime members. And still, we all share that joy when we first are walking around the corner and they just see that building there. It's just so amazing and surprising. Tonight, Gareth Loy will provide an illustrated talk on the founding and legacy of the Tourist Club, inspired by that European Die Naturfreunde. You can work on that one for me. Gareth, although born in Los Angeles, raised as a Dodger fan, is switched now. He's Northern California and a Giants fan. Not that it matters this season, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. He is, more importantly, History Committee Chair of the San Francisco Tourist Club since joining in 2017. He's also a composer and musician with a doctorate in music from Stanford University, longtime technologist and experience in both Silicon Valley and academia. And I had to look a little bit deeper because what does that mean really? And it means over 26 years of academic and professional experience in computer science, software, music, and digital audio. He's published widely in juried journals as the author of Musemathics, a 2-volume reference published by the MIT Press on mathematics, music, and digital audio. Certainly a talk for another time. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the Tourist Club. Welcome, please, Gareth Loy.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start off. Can you hear me? Pitching this book, which is The Histories of Nature Friends in California. This is an amplification of some of the comments I'm going to be making this evening. And I've got 6 copies of it. One of them is going into the Lucretia Little history room here in this library for free, but the rest of them are free to you tonight so long as you send a check for $30 to the tourist club. And the address is on the copyright page, and so I'll leave it to you, but we can talk about that afterwards. But I want to just start by quoting a little bit from this, something kind of strange and funny that happened to me. One of the portions of this book at the end is a little bit of information about some members, including yours truly. Curiously enough, I became the chair of the history committee of the San Francisco Nature Friends the very same day I became a member. And yes, the irony of being appointed historian of a century-old organization I had only just joined moments before was not lost on me or them. So it happened this way. After I was inducted into membership at a quarterly meeting, the next agenda item was the appointment of committee chairs. President Beata Piasek went down the list of committees asking for volunteers. When she got to the history committee, there was no response. And she gave the room a searching look and reminded us that this committee had been dormant for some time, and an uncomfortable silence settled over the room. A cloud went briefly over the sun. Then a miracle happened. I watched in astonishment as my own hand floated into the air, practically of its own accord. I then looked around, and I was all the more startled to see that mine was the only hand raised. This development caused a bit of a stir in the room because the president explained new members could not either chair committees for the first year after joining, but the club was not going to turn me down, so they found a substitute to be it, but I got to do all the work. Anyway, so there is so much more to this story than I'm going to be able to give to you in the next hour, but I've got 6 more copies of this book, and there's more where that came from. And let me give that to you. Thank you. And it's warm up here. This room got warm with all you folks showed up. So, thank you. Let's get this started. So I'm really glad to have this opportunity to come and talk about the California Nature Friends clubs. First, I have to thank my predecessor, especially Eric Fink, whose work provided crucial details about the founding in the earliest days of our club. The book that I just showed you is indebted to his work, and I do have a few more copies if we run out, because I see there's a pretty good crowd tonight. From my first work days as a prospective member, I was attracted to the openness, camaraderie, and dedication of the members of the club and the well-being. And it's a big production to keep this club going. And yet I saw how members continually stepped up to help make it happen. And I wondered, how could it be possible that this passionate dedication would have survived the entire 20th century, despite everything else that happened in the world? In my talk tonight, you will repeatedly see the century-old history of the Tourist Club members saying yes and following through, and it's very inspiring to watch. I'll begin with a brief history of the founding of Die Naturfreunde in Europe. Yes, I've practiced pronouncing that. Then I'll delve into the founding of the San Francisco, Oakland, and Los Angeles clubs. Yes, there are 3 Nature Friends clubs in California. Finally, we'll hitch a ride with the Tourist Club members who in 1924 and 28 went on month-long treks in the High Sierras that were captured on film by Mimi Heidelman, the wife of San Francisco Nature Friends' first president, Wilhelm Heidelman. So our small compound of Bavarian-style buildings is nestled into Throckmorton Ridge, floating above Muir Woods and below the peaks of Mount Tamalpais. Perhaps you've seen it while walking past it on the Sun Trail or the Redwood Trail. Perhaps you attended one of our public fests, like Mayfest, or perhaps Summerfest in July, or Kinderfest in September. Or you may have heard about monthly work days, held the second Sunday of every month when members and prospective members gathered to help keep the clubhouse and the grounds in top condition. Our name, the Touristenverein Die Naturfreunde, translates Tourist Association of Nature Friends. Originally, the club was mostly made up of German immigrants, many of whom came to San Francisco to help it rebuild after the 1906 earthquake. Not surprisingly, perhaps, we're often called the German Club in the old days. But how did a German club end up on the side of Mount Tamalpais? Why did they call themselves tourists? And what do they mean by nature friends? Our founders had all belonged to Die Naturfreunde in Europe, founded by these three gentlemen in 1895. From left to right, socialist and elementary school teacher Georg Schmiedl, law student Karl Renner, and philosopher blacksmith Alois Rohrauer. Karl Renner later became the first chancellor of Austria. He's often referred to as the father of the Republic because he led the first Austrian Republic in 1919, and he also established and became president of the Second German Republic after the fall of Nazi Germany in 1945 at the end of World War II. Die Naturfreunde was a cross between a workers' social movement and the nascent environmental movement in Europe. Its origin stemmed from the plight of the Austrian and German working people in the late 19th century. In those days, the Hohenzollern and Habsburg monarchies and their elites owned most of the German and Austrian forests, Alps, and mountains. The outer doors were off limit to working people. Property rights excluded any use of the forest and mountain land for recreational purposes. Even today, 70% of the forests and mountains in Austria and Germany are owned privately. Mountaineering was seen as an activity reserved for a selective few. These elites were seen as committed to the preservation of the Alps, but as their exclusive playground. The Alpenverein, then the largest alpine club in the world, maintained trails and mountain huts and kept firm control over access to the mountains, and even tighter control over what it meant to be an alpinist and who could be one. In the 1850s, the living conditions of working people in Austria and Germany were miserable, and they had an average life expectancy of 37 years. These quotes are from the publication Die Naturfreunde in 1922 that supported workers' rights. People were crammed into mass tenements, they don't get enough sun, they perform grueling, repetitive labor year in and year out. They have to spend all their free time in smoke-filled, damp beer halls and houses of ill repute instead of recovering life force through recreation and rest. So, you know, a mixed bag, I suppose, but the same article equated access to nature to access to culture, even to spirituality. Nature Friends sought to liberate working folk by restoring their connection to nature, which they had mostly lost. Let us flee from our unfree, limited existences into nature, into the mountains. Then our senses will not be dominated by the transitory materialism of this life. Thus does the spirit of man strive indefatigably upwards toward the light, towards truth. This is called culture. Members of Die Naturfreunde worked to reclaim public access and ownership to the out of doors where possible, and to provide members and their families with places to go to enjoy and study nature. There were many social movements in those times, many driven by the political aspirations of the working class, that sought to correct the economic imbalances of the times. Though it was largely apolitical, Die Naturfreunde was closely aligned with the Social Democratic Party of Germany. Die Naturfreunde's motto, Bergfrei, which translates as free mountains, expresses the need for free and open access to nature, which they felt was a basic human right. Kenneth Ladish, a friend of mine, points out that this phrase was specifically coined to contrast with the greeting Berg Heil, a saying first used by Viennese geographer and mountaineer August Böhm, and which became and remains the slogan of the German and Austrian Alpine Club. Bergfrei and Berg Heil are opposed greetings that emerged from different mountain climbing traditions in the late 19th century Austria. Their contrasting meanings reflect the class divide. Berg Heil was the slogan of the elite clubs, while Berg Frei was the democratic retort of working class mountaineers. In 1895, they organized a hike in the mountains and published an invitation in the newspaper, and lots of people showed up. That March, Georg Schmiedel advertised for 3 days in the Arbeiter Zeitung to find like-minded people to found a tourist club. On Easter Sunday, the first excursion to the Vienna woods took place. And then in September, 185 men and women founded Die Naturfreunde in Vienna as a tourist association. The organization soon grew to include many chapters and spread throughout Europe and eventually to the rest of the world. Many lodges and clubhouses were built, usually in forested areas, ski areas, always close to wilderness. Here's the cover of the first Nature Friends publication, 1897, showing a working man reveling in untrammeled nature. During the 1920s, as Nazism became ascendant, Naturfreunde members found themselves politically isolated. On holiday, they found themselves asked to pay extra fees at the Alpenvereins alpine huts, if they were allowed to enter at all. As the Weimar Republic approached its final years, members of Die Naturfreunde, like many political organizations opposed to the Nazis, were constantly harassed by Hitler's paramilitary force. Their members were beaten and their property was vandalized and destroyed. Long aligned with the Social Democratic Party of Germany, Die Naturfreunde was one of the first organizations to be disbanded after the Nazis came to power. In 1933, the Nazis outlawed and confiscated all Nature Friend properties, and for 16 years the movement came to a standstill in Germany. But it continued to flourish elsewhere, for example, in California. So who started the tourist club in California? This is a photo of our membership at Christmas in 1919. The founders in America were all European immigrants, obviously, German, Austrian, Swiss, tradesmen, artisans, artists, craftsmen, contractors, and builders. Most of them had been members of Die Naturfreunde in Europe. Here's an early photo of our tourist clubhouse in Mount Tam. It was built between 1912 and 1915 by the membership. My guess is this photo is from around 1915. In the early days, members treated the Touristenverein as strictly a German-speaking club. Members and their families went for long weekends constructing and taking care of the club, going on local hikes in Mount Tam and enjoying music and dance. These aims are not unlike, for example, the Sierra Club in the US, and many tourist club members are also members of the Sierra Club. However, the focus of the tourist club has always been on working men and women, and until late in the 1930s, membership in a trade union was required before becoming a nature friend. With the demographic changes in the Bay Area, our members are now much more eclectic, including lawyers, techies, CEOs, hipsters, and folks like you and me. Our founders came from Austria and Germany to help San Francisco rebuild after the '06 earthquake. Here they are building after the '06 earthquake in San Francisco. And they brought Die Naturfreunde's environmental spirit to America as well. Initially, they lived in the Mission District. German immigrants comprised a significant portion of the Mission District's immigrant population in those days. They boarded in Tivoli Hall, shown here, which they helped to build in 1907 in the aftermath of the devastating earthquake and fire that destroyed the neighborhood in 1906. It was later renamed Albion Hall, and still later Equality Hall. And you see here the Deutscher Arbeiter Bildungsverein, the ABV. In 1911, a group of these German immigrants began meeting in Tivoli Hall and formed an organization called the Deutscher Arbeiter Bildungsverein, the ABV, which translates as German Workmen's Educational Association. The ABV was dedicated to helping recent immigrants adjust to life in San Francisco. It provided a social center for progressive-minded tradesmen and a place for meetings to be held. All of the original members of the tourist club were also members of the ABV. And when I say progressive, what I really mean is socialist. members of the ABV called themselves socialists. But during the time of the tourist club members met in the ABV, the socialist aims of that organization were actually quite modest. Things like an 8-hour workday, banning child labor, minimum wage, worker safety, medical care. Most of the ABV political objectives were adopted and eventually enacted into law in the US over the intervening century. 30 years later, long after the tourist club members had decamped from Tivoli Hall, the renamed Albion Hall would become the meeting place of the so-called Albion Hall Group, a circle of longshoremen led by Harry Bridges, the famous San Francisco Union leader of the 1930s. These members of the ABV had been serious alpinists and members of Die Naturfreunde in Germany and Austria. So, on their days off in San Francisco, they looked around for mountains to climb. And in the distance, they saw Mount Tam across the Golden Gate. Notice there's no Golden Gate Bridge there. It wasn't finished till 1933. These ABV members were all avid hikers, and they had a friend, a German fine artist named John Stammer, who had built a house in Lagunitas in West Marin. All of Stammer's paintings were lost in the earthquake and fire in San Francisco in 1906. However, Stammer had saved one giant mural he'd painted, and he'd asked his hiking buddies to come and help them hang the mural in his home. This was the ABV members' first trip to Marin. It took the better part of a day even to get to Lagunitas from the Mission District where they lived. They had to use public transportation, such as riding the Market Street cable car. Isn't that cute? To the ferry building at the foot of Market Street. Looks vaguely familiar except for the coal-burning train in the front of it. Or they might have taken the Hyde Street cable car, also very cute, to the Hyde Street Pier. Either way, they would then ride a ferry to the Sausalito Pier, shown here with terminal, yards, depot, cars, and a fleet of ferry steamers. Then they'd get on the interurban electric trolley, shown here at the Tamalpais High School station. And in this case, they rode it all the way to the end of the line in Fairfax. That's White's Hill in the background on the left. From there, they hiked 7 miles west out to Lagunitas to hang the painting in their friend's house. And this is the painting. Still on display in John Stammer's house in 2017, over a century later. The theme is Diana and Actaeon, portraying a tale from Ovid. Several generations of the Stammer family had lived in the house over the intervening century. Their heirs knew about the connection between Stammer and the founding of the tourist club. And so his heirs invited me, the brand new historian of the tourist club, to come to the house and see the mural before they sold it. In the process, I learned that the trip to hang this painting was the inaugural hike of our tourist club band. During that trip, our founders decided to form the local San Francisco branch of Die Naturfreunde. Oh, and by the way, for those of you who know him, on the left-hand side, that's the back of Rich Mazzini, a fellow member of the tourist club who went with me that day. Here's how John Stammer's house looks today. And here's a photo of the house from our club archives. That's all tourist club members standing in front, probably sometime in the 1920s. The Stammer house was for years a popular way station for tourist club members to use to explore West Marin. Members slept on the floor of the large downstairs room where the painting still hangs. After that first trip to Stammer's house, our founders traveled and hiked all over West Marin. One day, they took the Mill Valley spur of the interurban electric railway to the Mill Valley Depot. And then they climbed aboard the crookedest railroad in the world, which had opened in 1896, and which ferried passengers from the Mill Valley Depot to the east peak of Mount Tam. Here's a photo of the so-called double bow knot, a set of twists to allow the train to navigate the steep terrain. This section is fairly near the Mountain Home Inn. The roadbed is still intact and is used today by bikers, hikers, and bicyclists. I can't even talk. Here's what Mill Valley looked like in the 1930s. This aerial view is not unlike the view they had from the top of Mount Tam, except the Richardson Bay Bridge up there at the very top of the photo, which was made of redwood in the 1930s, would not have been there, and the town would have been even more sparse. Here's an aerial photograph of Marin County taken from 15,000 feet in 1926. Isn't that something? Oh, and notice the banner of the Lucretia Little History Room. While I was researching this talk, I spent a fair amount of time here rifling through their photographic archives. Sometimes our members would jump off the train at the West Point Inn and hike back down or camp out in one of the many campgrounds that were privately operated on the side of Mount Tam. Here's a photo of them camping at Cascade Canyon in Mill Valley, identified as being on the property of a Mr. Schmid. Barry Spitz says in his book about Mount Tam that our founding members became quite well known, camping frequently in the Throckmorton, Cascade, and Blythedale canyons. Here's the Blythedale Hotel and its environs in the late 19th century. Plenty of space to pitch a tent. In those days, tourist club members were often the only ones on the mountain. One day, they hiked from the Mill Valley Depot up the Dipsey Steps, which were originally built in 1905, to the Sun Trail at the crest of Throckmorton Ridge, where it splits off from the Dipsey, and saw a for sale sign on a steep hillside with an old cabin on it. With this breathtaking view of Mount Tam, here's an excerpt of a letter from Bernard Fisher, one of our founders, to the leader of the group, Wilhelm Heidelmann, in 1912, after they saw that picture of it. Wilhelm, I know you have your heart set on this breathtakingly beautiful mountainside site, so strikingly alpine in character. Shouldn't we make this spot of heaven on earth available to all of us like-minded? We should purchase this as our site for our nature friends. Berg Fry, my dear friend, the mountains are indeed for everyone, and this mountain is for us. Wilhelm Heidelmann was an artist and a painter and one of the tourist club founders. He purchased the land in 1912. Other members reimbursed him from their workers' paychecks, and they built the facilities with their own hands. This photo from 1912 shows the existing cottage in the property. The cottage was run down and inadequate to their needs, so they tore it down and commenced to build a proper clubhouse. No one had a car, and anyway, there were no roads. This was long before the panoramic highway was built in 1933, 2 decades after the clubhouse was built. So everyone who came to the club hiked to it from Mill Valley. To build the clubhouse, they bought lumber and building supplies. Where else? At the Mill Valley Lumber Company, or brought it over on the Sausalito Ferry from San Francisco. Every single piece of wood in that building was transported to the building site by pulling materials and supplies across the mountain by mule and manual labor. Just getting there took hours. At the crest of the ridge, where today Panoramic Trail meets Ridge Road, the materials would be strapped onto sleds for the slippery and dangerous trip down the steep embankment to the building site. They all gladly contributed their workers' pay and their labor in order to secure this precious pied-à-terre under Mount Tam and floating just above Muir Woods. Gesundheit. Perfect. In 1918, they bought a donkey named Jack to carry supplies up and down the steep trail to the clubhouse. The children who enjoyed spending vacations at the club enjoyed riding Jack, as did this dog in the photo. Jack always showed up at the kitchen door late in the afternoon to get supper leftovers, and he would bray loudly if no one answered his call. They added a dance floor in 1914. So now notice tourist club guys standing casually in high places with hardly a foothold, rather the way goats do. This is the theme that I will return to frequently in this talk. They officially opened their clubhouse in 1917. They had 500 members already. Over 125 folks camped out and celebrated with the giant Alpine Festival. Here's a group photo on the dance floor. Later, the lodge was extensively decorated with bas-relief Malerei, traditionally peasant folk paintings. By 1926, several adjacent lots were purchased and additional buildings were erected. We all still gather for monthly work days, and often more than 100 of us show up at each occasion. This photo shows the decorations underneath the gable. Here they are celebrating the holidays in 1918, still very European looking. Here's a local band of musicians playing on the dance floor. Note the accordion and the drums, very traditional. Skiing, hiking, outdoor activities, music, dancing, social activities, festivals. In a word, Gemütlichkeit, friendliness. And they were avid and formidable alpinists. Here's a tourist club mountaineer guy showing off a little bit. Here's more tourist club guys showing off. I think this is the top of Half Dome, but I'm not entirely sure. Anybody know? Yes, it is. Okay, good to know. And here's more serious mountain climbing. The tradition of alpinism carried to California. When these guys were climbing mountains, they typically had the whole place to themselves. These guys were in seriously good shape, and they need to be to survive the trips that they took to the Sierras in the 10s and the 20s. Here's an early map showing the tourist club in 1936, drafted by C.A. Phillips and printed by the Tamalpais Conservation Club, the TCC. Note that the trail shown running from the Alpine Club down to the Tourist Club was then called the Tourist Club Trail. Let me see if I can point to it. It's right there, Tourist Club Trail. And there's the Tourist Club. Oops. Looks like I got a little ahead of myself in the process. There we are. Here's a little more modern map. At some point, the Tourist Club Trail was renamed the Redwood Trail. Muir Woods was established in 1908, only 4 years before the Tourist Club was established. William Kent gave Muir Woods as a gift to the United States to keep it from being logged and turned into a reservoir. President Theodore Roosevelt used the Antiquities Act of 1908 to create the Muir Woods National Monument. At that time, most land in and around Mount Tam was privately owned, and it would take a century to create the public preserve on Mount Tam that we enjoy today. Nature Friends provided places and natural settings where people can afford to go in their leisure time. Besides the fests and guest days, we organize hikes and outdoor adventures to help members get out of doors together. We go camping, build trails, publish newsletters, establish libraries, hold meetings, and promote friendships with other organizations. And we also like to socialize, sing and dance, raise toasts, and drink beer. We send representatives to the Tamalpais Conservation Club, the TCC, Muir Woods Park Community Association, Federation of Western Outdoor Clubs, and Nature Friends International. Besides the San Francisco Nature Friends, there are clubs in Oakland and Los Angeles. We also own Heidelman Lodge in the Sierras and the San Jacinto Cabin in Mount San Jacinto in Southern California. All three California clubs merged in 1927 to form the California Nature Friends Corporation, a 501c7 not-for-profit, apolitical, and mutual benefit organization. And the deeds for the properties are all held by the corporate body. And that's actually probably the reason why California has tourist clubs, and they are nowhere else in the United States. There was a large gathering of nature friends organizations on the East Coast, but they did not have the strength in numbers that we have to be able to withstand the onslaught of political forces that were at work in those times. But we persist, mostly, I think, because we're a corporation, a nonprofit, apolitical corporation. Here's our Muir Woods Clubhouse with a view of the West Peak, and that's Throckmorton Ridge above to the right. The Los Angeles Club was built in 1920, shown at left, in the city of Sierra Madre near Pasadena, and they also have a cabin near Idlewild in Mount San Jacinto, shown at the right. Unfortunately, the LA Clubhouse burned to the ground in the recent Eaton fire of January 2025. Members say they will hand-build a new lodge, just as the club's German founders did. I wish them luck. The Oakland Nature Friends Clubhouse was also built in 1920, and it's located on 3 acres in the idyllic hills of Oakland with a view of the San Francisco Bay, and it's still very much an ongoing organization. Both of them are. In 1931, the members built Sierra House, which was located in Norden, California, fairly near Truckee. Here's the membership enjoying Christmas in 1939 at Sierra House. That building burned down in 1943, somewhat suspiciously, given it was in the middle of World War II. But it could also have been faulty wiring. Nobody knows. The membership built Heidelman Lodge in 1947 on the same site as the Sierra House. Heidelman Lodge is named for our beloved William Heidelman, the first president of the Nature Friends San Francisco. All of our clubs are affiliated with Nature Friends International, or NFI, which connects all of our clubs internationally. It's the successor organization to Die Naturfreunde. This is the organization that was banned by the Nazis in 1933. It was revived in 1945 at the end of the Second World War. Our organization was also called Friends of Nature, Les Amis de la Nature in French, Amici della Natura in Italian, and many other languages as well. NFI is an organization of outdoor enthusiasts with over 600,000 members worldwide. It's a member of the Green 10, a coalition of 10 of the largest environmental organizations active in Europe working to protect the environment, promoting biodiversity and human health. They have about 1,400 clubhouses in 21 countries around the world, mainly in Europe, but also in Asia, Israel, Kenya, Mexico, and California. Some are simple cabins with wood-burning stoves in the kitchen and mattresses placed side by side in the sleeping rooms. A few are super modern hotel-like clubhouses. Most of them are cozy little houses or buildings with cooking and sleeping and lounging facilities for between, say, 3 and 120 people. This is the Auberge d'Armand in Ardennes, Belgium, located a few kilometers from the German and Luxembourg borders. So let's take some trips with our tourist club. First, we'll go to the Sierra Lodge in about 1930. Let's start in the Market Street cable cars, shown in 1924, and ride to the ferry building, and take the Oakland ferry this time, to the ferry terminal in Oakland, then take the Key System streetcar to the 16th Street station, where they pick up the train, and ride the train to Soda Springs. Then they have a 1.5-mile hike to Norden, near the Donner Summit. Then they have to go to the tavern in Norden to pick up the key to the Sierra House, and maybe something else they might want. Then walk or ski another half-mile through the snow to the Sierra house, dig it out from the snow, bring in some wood and start a fire, and then finally start to thaw out. For years, any nature friends who wanted to go downhill skiing had to climb up to the peak behind the Sierra house to ski down, but sometime in the 1930s, they ordered a motorized rope tow from San Francisco and had it shipped to the summit of the Lincoln Highway. There it was loaded and hauled across the tracks and up past the lodge to the ski hill above, and then a quarter-mile further on. And this may very well have been the very first lift in the summit. Now let's start going further afield with the nature friends. The logo there, Hand in Hand durch Berg und Land, hand in hand over mountain and country, was the first motto of Die Naturfreunde. In 1924, they took their first Sierra trip, 3 weeks, to Mount Brewer in the Kings Canyon National Park. They each carried 20 pounds and had 2 mules and 2 cowboys named Slim and Ned. Here they are in the Kings Canyon National Park, East Lake with Mount Brewer behind. Here they are again on their 21-day hike, Mount Brewer from the East Lake. This is the photo that graces the cover of my book, The Histories of Nature Friends in California. At Velma Lake near Lake Tahoe in the Desolation Wilderness. So the tourist club had a kind of a satellite organization at Velma Lakes during the Depression, and out of work men who had nowhere else could go to Velma Lakes, and the tourist club would feed them and give them a place to sleep over the summer. And of course, in the wintertime, it would get too cold. Here they are at Mirror Lake in Yosemite with Mount Watkins in the background. In July of 1928, they took a very extended tour of the Sierras from Yosemite to the Minarets and many points in between. The following images are from a photo album created by Mimi Heidelman, wife of our founder, Wilhelm Heidelman. This photo album still lives in the library closet of our club. Here they are on their camping trip to the Minarets, July 1928. It looks to me like it's about 36 people, about a third of them are women. They even brought a guitar and a mandolin. Here they are at Soda Springs at Tuolumne Meadows, and there's their 3 cowboys. And the cowboys, of course, would be responsible for schlepping much of the food and even some of the supplies and other things that people wanted to bring along. Here's Sierra Lodge at Soda Springs and Tuolumne Meadows, Yosemite Park's high country. It was built by the Sierra Club in 1915 and was then known as Hotel Grinnell, named for the Sierra Club director and naturalist Dr. Joseph Grinnell. It's now known as Parsons Memorial Lodge at Soda Springs, and it now contains a small museum open to the public. Breakfast at Soda Springs. This building is a part of the Parsons Lodge site. Here they are at White Cascade, next to the Glen Allen High Sierra Camp. Look at the amount of water. Wow. Here's Water Wheel Falls. Here they are at Donahue Pass, elevation 11,155 feet. And the Ritter Range from Rush Creek Basin on July 6th. Banner Peak, elevation 12,957 feet. That's Mimi Heidelman in the photograph. Here they are at camp at Lake of Thousand Island. And here's the second call for soup. And here's Lake of Thousand Islands and Banner Peak in the background. Garnet Lake with Mount Ritter and Mount Banner, elevation 9,704 feet on July 7th. Lake Elysia, elevation 9,200 feet. The minarets from Lake Elysia, elevation 12,278 feet. The minarets. Now check this out. This is the Minaret Glacier, a crevasse that forms where moving glacier ice separates from stagnant ice above. Pretty wild. Crossing crevasses of Minaret Glacier. On the right, we have the iceberg lake with the minarets in the background. Here's a modern photo from approximately the same vantage point. Note the difference in the size of the glaciers between this photo and this one. Can you say global warming? Here's the Minaret Glacier. Look at that. I don't think we see the likes of that sort of thing these days anymore. And now check this out. The ladies brought their swimsuits along and they're snow bathing. Here's the top of Mount Ritter, elevation 13,156 feet. Here's the top view from Mount Ritter, looking south. Here's a Shadow Lake with Mount Ritter in the background. Shadow Creek Cascades. Shadow Creek Cascades on the trail to Devil's Post Pile, which was quite a ways south from where they started. Here's the minarets from a distance. Devil's Post Pile, on our way to Mammoth, July 9th. And the inset is also coming back from Mammoth with the horses. Here they are at a Trapper's Canyon at Devil's Post Pile on July 9th and 10th. Here's Rainbow Falls, the middle fork of the San Joaquin River on July 9th. What a wild place. Lake Mary, Mammoth Pass, July 10th. Here's their main camp at Shadow Creek, elevation 9,100 feet, July 7th through 13th. Miner's cabin leaving Shadow Creek campground. Sliding down to Garnet Lake. This looks like a double exposure to me, but I think you can see what they're going down this traverse across a glacier. Here's mountains, Ritter and Banner, seen from Geno Pass on July 14th. Camp at Alger Lake. Snowballing at Alger Lake. A snowbank below Parker Pass. Look at the size of that glacier in the bottom photo. Isn't that amazing? Cathedral Peak from Sunrise Trail, elevation 10,938 feet, July 17th. Two photos of bathing at Little Yosemite, where they camped between July 17th and 19th. And the Sierras from a distance. I think this is Tuolumne Meadows. Anybody have an opinion? And here's Half Dome. And there's a couple of their cowboys on Sunday morning with no place to go. Look at those hats. Lustig ist Zergunnerleben. Happy is the gypsy life. So here they are back on the train. And now if you put all the locations that I just showed you in the photographs into Google Earth, this is what you get. The top right corner is Mono Lake for orientation. And now if we assume that what Mimi Heidelman put the photographs in her album in order, this is the trip they took from Yosemite Valley up to Tuolumne Meadows, down the ridge of the Sierras to Mount Ritter, down to Devil's Post Pile, back up to an overlook of Mono Lake, and then back to Yosemite. This photo still hangs on the walls of our dining hall and memorializes this month-long expedition in the Sierras. This image sums up the nature friends, a couple fleeing from the dirty, smoky factories of the crowded cities for the freedom of the mountains. The Nature Friends motto, Berg Frei, expresses the need for free enjoyment of the mountains by all. Berg Frei remains the slogan of Nature Friends everywhere. So now it's time to say thanks. Thank you to the courageous immigrants, founders of the Tourist Club, as well as immigrants from every country and every walk of life, including your ancestors and mine, who took a chance that America would extend its renowned freedoms to all of its citizens in equal measure, even to working men and women who came here from a foreign country. It was immigrants like these who made America great in the first place. I honor the great work of our Tourist Club, now 113 years old, and those who carry on the traditions of our founders. Shakespeare said, "One touch of nature makes the whole world kin." That's why we need the Tourist Club, the Sierra Club, the TCC, the Alpine Club, and longtime. We need everyone to love our Mother Nature. If you'd like to join us, we'll welcome you to attend a work day, which we have monthly on the second Sunday starting at 10 a.m. You can also get more information from our website, touristclubsf.org, or by speaking to me this evening. Berg Frei.
Thank you so much, Gareth, and don't go anywhere. We have time for Q&A, and this works. We'll go about 5-10 minutes, and longer if we have to. But if you stay longer, you got to help us put chairs away. So, a couple things I just loved what you said is that they had to spend time in the beer halls. I've never had to do that. But again, the working class. You did mention Golden Gate Bridge in '33, and when you say a date in front of the Historical Society, you'll hear the murmur of. You meant 37, right?
Uh-oh.
Started in 33. I think you completed 37.
Thank you. I'll make that correction.
Yeah, and then if you could just clarify, my first question is, growing up here, we could wander in. It seemed like at any time, and there was room for a picnic and maybe for the adults to have a beer or something like that. Mm-hmm. But not so much now. It's gotten too popular. It's almost like you have to. Well, please speak in the microphone.
Oh, sure.
Talk about it. The availability or for just non-members to visit.
Sure. At one time, not too long ago, the Tourist Club had the name the Bar in the Woods. I'm not exactly sure what happened because that was before my time. I joined in 2017, but I think there was some regulation which came down from above that said, okay, you really only got to sell beer to members. So that's where things stand at this point. However, all you have to do is come to a work day, and we will give you a free beer. And maybe if you're good, even some lunch.
Okay, stay there, please. Questions, yes.
I just wanted to say that we were members many years ago, and my husband, two stories. My husband was asked what his work association was, and being a lawyer, he said the bar. He was very frequently asked to tend bar. Secondly, when we went to Washington, D.C., and he took a job with AID, we discovered to our delight that we were members of a subversive organization. At that time, which would have been 1965, we were given a list of organizations, had we ever belonged to any of these, and it was on the Attorney General's list.
It was.
We were delighted. I had no idea. Subversive. But there it is.
Congratulations.
A subversive
Yep.
bartender.
Yeah, let me add just a comment to that. As I mentioned, there were a number of tourist clubs in the East Coast, and one of the problems that they had was a lack of cohesion among them to create a formidable enough of an association that was impervious to the political forces at work in the country in those times. And so they no longer exist. And I think one of the reasons why the clubs here in California do persist is because they are in this 501c7 organization that they all group together, and they're explicitly non-political. Yes?
I had a couple questions. One, tourist, did it have a different connotation back in those days?
Yeah, actually it did. The term tourist came from the original idea that in Germany, you would be an alpinist, for example. You would be someone who would walk out on trails, or go from hut to hut, if you're a member of the Alpenverein. So that the term became changed in English to its present meaning in America. But I think in Germany, the notion of being a tourist is still somebody who enjoys ambulating and schlepping around in nature on their own.
And I also wondered that 1928 hike that they did, or tour that they did, did you ever calculate mileage and elevation? Their total?
No, I gave up when I got as far as I did, because I think I had to give the presentation the next day, and I've been around out of time. But it would not be hard to do, because I think I've got most of the statistics available, and it would just be a question of sitting down with the map. Yes, in the back?
In the early 1950s, my parents, I grew up in southern Germany, just born before World War II, and my parents would take my brother and I for hikes. That would be our main outing. We would be going from hut to hut in Austria, and especially in the Dolomites, but also throughout Europe. And when my parents would come here to visit us in Mill Valley, of course we would go up to the Naturfreunde house, because they have been members forever. And I also very fondly remember you go from hut to hut, but then you also help with dinner, you help with tidying up, you help with breakfast. It was a very wonderful sense of community.
I couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, I can also add that I'm staying at the Tourist Club. So as a member, I get to have a room for $12 a night, which I might have to share with others. But there is a rule in Tourist Club organizations that there will always be a place for you to sleep, no matter when you show up or what condition you're in. Now, it may be in a hallway, but there will always be a place for you. Anyone else? Yes?
How many beds are up at the tourist club here?
Oh gosh, I haven't counted them.
Roughly.
There might, oh well. There's also outbuildings. So there's the main building, there's a honeymoon cabin, there's oh gosh, what's the name of it? I'm sorry? Bungalow, thank you, the bungalow. And out of doors. There's also some kind of defunct places like Roy's Cabin, which I don't think you'd even want to go in because it needs some serious work. But it might be on the order of 35, 40 people who could sleep there overnight, something like that.
Usually filled on weekends?
Boy, it really depends. You know, last night I'm the only one there. Besides the caretaker, there's always a caretaker. But on weekends, if there's a band, you know, the place can really fill up pretty fast. Yes?
Yes, I have fond memories of doing polka dancing at the tourist club. And I keep hoping there'll be another opportunity, but it doesn't appear to be.
Well, there is still a Schiplattler group that I didn't get to mention, but that is covered in a chapter of my book, which is basically a group of members who formed a dance troupe that focuses on polka, and they perform at events for the tourist club. But you're right, there was, you know, not too long before I joined, still a band that would come. Oh gosh, what's his name? Joe Schmiel, thank you very much. and his polka band, and he'd be up on the stage, and there would be couples swinging and dancing around and having a good time. But you're right, that has kind of fallen away in recent years, and it's a shame. Who first? Pick one.
I just have a short question about, can hikers just like go by and just like bring their own lunch, just sit on the deck or on the property? Or is it just for members?
I don't know the answer to that. I think at this point there are parts of it that are available to all comers, but most of the territory is, if you want to really come and enjoy the place, you would come on a work day. And do something, and then get your beer. Yes.
Are there any public, any days that the public is welcome?
Anybody have an answer to that?
Yes.
Yes. In the back.
It's to the discretion of the caretaker or the member who is subbing for the caretaker. So you take a chance.
Yeah, so on visiting, it varies, and if it's crowded, no, and a lot of times during the week, if it's just a caretaker, sometimes. But going
Yeah.
back to answer the question for the public,
Yes.
there's the 3 festivals that were mentioned there.
Yeah.
The May Fest, you didn't say what month that was. And then there's the summertime, and then in the fall,
And there are also, there was a rockabilly performer there fairly recently, and I think that was open to the public, if I'm not mistaken.
But I will say that the fests now sell out rather quickly because of our beloved internet and the popularity that there's a lot of times it is sold out. And hikers or those that may have expected, had it on their calendar and wander up, find it's full and they can't participate. So it's something you need to plan ahead for. But it's certainly worth it.
Yeah. Couple more? Are we good? Awesome. Thank you so
Gareth,
much.
thanks so much. Jared will be up here with copies of the book for those that are interested. If you do have a chance, please help us with the chairs. Otherwise, don't forget to circle the annual dinner. And we'll see you otherwise next first Wednesday.